Okay, good afternoon, IB Bio. This is Mr. McGee. I'm going to make a video for you today on the lab report that's going to be due this Friday for the investigation between tree trunks and canopy size relationships. This is going to be a little less formal of a video than I've made in the past, simply because I'm not going to take the time to edit it and do all that stuff. So I'm just going to try to make this as quick as I can. And again, you do not need to use Excel to turn in your lab. But a lot of you have expressed interest in using Excel, not only to boost your skills, but also because it's a lot easier to do. Let's just be honest, and I would definitely commend you if you wanted to do that. So I'm going to take the time to do this video, and hopefully you'll take the time to see what you need to do in order to make a very decent lab report. So let's go ahead and get started. First things first, you have your data, and that was on the last page that I gave you. And again, we're looking at canopy diameter and trunk circumference at breast height. This is actual student data that was given to me a couple of years ago. You can see the white oak versus the red maple. The only reason, again, we didn't do it is simply because we've obviously had bad weather days. But what I've done is I've already put this into a template, and this is on Google Classroom. You guys will have to enter the data in here manually, but I've already gone ahead and done it in this case. So first thing we probably want to do is just tidy this up, and to just make you or show you how to make a nice little title page in that. What you're going to, or I'm sorry, a table. What you're going to do is first add a bunch of lines in there. And what I like to do in this case is you just kind of, well, you can do this a number of ways. Because the borders are not really defined, I'm just going to go and highlight all of this, and I am going to go up here to my border tool, and I'm going to click all borders. I can even click here and add some borders down there like that. I don't necessarily want to click the entire thing and highlight it, only because of this one last little square. It doesn't have a line at the top and the side, and when you go ahead and copy the table over to another page, it just doesn't look as good. But now that I've got my grid in there like that, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of highlight these a little gray color. And don't make it too dark because they don't print very well when you go to print, as I've learned in the past. And you know what? You can go ahead and highlight these if you want to. I like this because it lets me see where my data is at. But you can pretty much do what you wish in this case. So I'm also going to I'm probably going to go up here and just get rid of these. So I'll highlight those cells, and then I'll go here to no fill. This just looks a little bit easier and more pleasant for the eye to see. So go ahead and do that. And with that said, what you're going to do now is we're going to do some calculations. So in order to do, well, I guess what I'll say first is let's go ahead and center the data, and you're going to highlight it. But let's just go ahead and highlight all the cells. This will center all future data that we put in each of these columns, and I like that. So now that we've got our data centered, we're going to go ahead and calculate the average and the mean. And to do this, Excel has a pretty handy tool in the corner that says Auto Sum, and it has a few basic other features in it. So we can do this a number of ways. We could use the function tab, of course, but I'm just going to show you this real quick. So let's go highlight this entire row. And for Excel, if you go one cell down like that, you can then walk over here to Auto Sum and then just click the Auto Sum button. Boom. Likewise, let's do canopy diameter. You go all the way down plus one cell, and we're going to tell the computer to calculate our sum in that category there. Likewise, if we want to calculate the mean, we normally could just highlight the whole thing down, but since we have the sum right there, we don't want to include that with our mean, so we can't do that. So what we're going to do instead for this one is we are simply going to click the cell right there, and then we're going to type in a function. You can come up here to functions if you don't know, but click the cell and come up here to function. And we could have used sum here, but we're going to click average. And this, by clicking that, we are going to now highlight our raw data. That means just the samples 1 through 10 and not the sum. By clicking on it, there we go. So let's do that one more time. Click on a cell that you want calculated, and then you come up here to equals average, and then you click OK. Or if you know what the equation is, I think we just hit equals average, and it's right there, and we just click on it. So you can also type it out if you know exactly what it is. Whoops. And in this case, for my video, I don't want to look up exactly how they spell it, so I'm just going to move this along. And again, do not include your sum in this. There we go. All right, so we've got our sum as well as our averages for each of those categories. And another cool little tip to throw out for everybody is we can copy this cell so we don't have to do it again, but I'll show you how to do that. But before we can do any of this stuff, we have to know what these categories are. Pretty easy to do once you get the hang of it. So first, X and Y is going to be X times Y. And by doing that, I'm just going to click in the cell, and I'm going to type in it. I want this cell to equal, and I'm going to put these in brackets. I want the cell to equal cell B3. So I'm going to type in equals B3, and then I'm going to write times the star, although I think it still calculates if you don't put the star in there. But cell B3 times cell C3, and put bracket back around it. And with that said, it will highlight the cells to make sure it was done correctly. Now hit enter before doing anything else. And there you go. So pretty simple, and that's really all there is to it. And you know what the beauty is of Excel? As long as you make sure you did it correctly, all you have to do is click on the cell that you wanted and then copy the cell. You do this by hitting Control-C on your computer, or you just go up here to copy, obviously. Now that I've copied that cell equation, I'm going to click on all the remaining cells just to the 10th sample, and now I'm going to paste it by going Control-V, like that. And now look at that. We don't even have to do anything else. It just pasted it all for us. In fact, yeah, I'm not even sure. Oh, the paste option is right there, so I'm not sure why that didn't highlight, but anyways. So, like I said, a little less informal. I haven't rehearsed it ahead of time. I'm sorry it's going to take a little longer, but hopefully you'll take the time to learn this. So now, cell X2. How in the world do we do this one? Well, there's a couple ways we can do it. I'm going to hit equals, and we want the X value here. We don't want to type in 125 because we want the cell to be copied with it. So cell B3, I'm going to type cell B3, and I could do, let's see if the Alt key works here for this one. I believe the key is 178. It worked. Okay, cool. You could do Alt 0178, and that makes the square key. So that is Alt 0178 on a PC. I do not believe that works on a Mac. Or you could just do it the old-fashioned way, times the same cell, B3. So by doing that, it's going to square it. And again, as long as you did it right, make sure you did it right. You can copy it, Control-C, and then paste it on every other cell, Control-V, just like that. Let's do Y square again now. So let's do equals, and I'm just going to go through this, equals cell C3, and we're going to times that by itself, cell C3. Okay? And again, I'm going to go ahead and copy all this raw data down by copying and then pasting it, Control-C and Control-V. So now that we've done that, look how much easier that was than doing that by hand. So now let's go back and figure out what our sums are. Well, to do this, we can just do what we did over here in AutoSum, or we can do it another way. Click the cell and then just go here to Sum. And I'll only show you this as an alternative. You can just highlight this entire row here and click Sum like that. Okay. Another interesting trick you can do, I'll show you ahead of time, even if we didn't do that there, because this cell right there is automatically copying all of this column and it's all lined up, you could just do this. Copy that cell and paste it across there. And like the mean, you can just copy it and paste it across there as well. So look at that. You didn't even have to enter it for each one of the cells. As long as you calculate any one column and it uses the same equation, it will paste it in the same column. And likewise here, as long as you did it, the equation in one row and it's the same in all rows, it will paste the equation in all rows. And there you go. All of your data should be nice, neat, and centered, and everything should look really nice and neat at this point. Okay? Now, we will talk a little later about decimal points and how, the proper ways to use just decimal points, but as it stands, this is pretty sufficient. Now, don't forget, you have to do this with the other tree species, and in this case, this was our white oak. So we're just going to leave it like that. You need to do the same thing with the other tree species as well. Okay? And by the way, just to show you how to make the, the borders a little thicker on this one, I believe how I did it before is I just kind of came to sum, and then I went ahead and I went to border, and I think what I did is I got rid of the entire, I think I clicked on no borders, So it looks like that. And then and I'm sure there's a better way to do it, but I highlighted it like this. And then I went to line, let's see here. Trying to think off the top of my head how I did this earlier here, but again, that's why I like to rehearse these. You should be able to pick a border thickness. These don't look as thick as I was hoping, but I'm going to click right there like that for line thickness, and now I'm going to add, I'll just add the outside border like that. There we go. It made it a little bit thicker, and then just to make my inner borders right there, I'm just going to go back to my I'm just going to go here to all borders like that. So I guess you could do this all one at a time, but that would take a while. But that's how you can change the thickness of your border. So now that I got all this done, the reason I highlighted the sum here by making the borders thicker is because in the sum, this is what we're going to enter in our equation when you do this by hand. But lucky you, you do not have to do this by hand, because in order to calculate the R value here, we call this R equals, and I'm going to move it just to the edge there. In order to calculate our R value, you don't need to do it all you don't need to punch it in on a calculator, because Excel will do that for you. Now, you still need to show your work on your lab report, but at least you can use this to check your work. So come up here to I and click on the cell right there. And if it highlights, you can always click back on it like that. So click the empty cell next to R. And to do this, we're going to look for a function, the equation. And this one is going to be correlation coefficient. So I believe it's under statistical. You scroll down and look for, statistical is right there. And it should say correlation or correl. And where is it at? Right there. Correlation or correl. And if we go ahead and click OK on that, it's going to ask us for two arrays, array 1 and array 2. And what this is the data for X and the data for Y. Let's go ahead for array 1, and we are just going to click in there and highlight all of our raw data for the X column. And then we're going to click on array 2 and highlight all the data for our Y column. And you do not need to do any more beyond that. Just make sure you don't get any of the stuff down there. Click OK, and here is our calculated R value. And by walking around some of the groups today, they looked pretty good. You can change your decimal points by going out like this. We'll talk more about decimal points rules and significant figures, but there you go. That is your R value. Okay? With that said, how do you make a graph? So before I do that, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, and I can cut it by hitting, Control X. That will actually delete it out, and then Control V for pasting. That'll actually move it so it just looks better, and I'll move that to the side there like that by using these. So how do I go ahead and make a graph? Well, to do that, there is a couple ways, but the easiest way to make a scatter plot in this case is on Excel, you click and highlight your x-axis, and then without doing anything else, now you click the button Control on your keyboard and then click and highlight your raw data for your Y. So again, click and highlight your X category and then let go of your mouse. Now you click Control on your keyboard and then click and highlight the raw data there for the Y column. If you don't do it in exactly that order, it will screw up, but we just told the computer we want the horizontal and the vertical axis. Go up here to Insert. Make sure you come here to the chart, specifically called a scatter plot, and make sure you don't pick the lines. We want just the values. Click on your scatter plot just like that. Okay? So I'm not going to make it too formal for today as far as what you must do for your lab, but you can probably throw in a nice title. You can always click on the dots here. This will allow you to actually right-click, and you can change the size of your dots if you want to by coming here and marker. You can change how thick your dots are, what color they are. I'm not even going to bother with that today, but just to kind of show you for future reference. But what you will need to do now is to scale this appropriately. And what I mean by that is we don't want this data with all this empty space. So I want this from 0 to 50. I don't really think I need that. So let's go ahead and click and right-click Format Access. I don't really need that, so I'm going to tell the computer for this access, we're going to go not 0 to 250. Let's just go from, say, 50. And there's nothing after 200, so let's go 50 to 200. And if you look, it makes a little bit better use of our space than we had before. And if you notice here, there's nothing, if we look at our chart titles and that, I'd say for the vertical axis, it's probably okay for the most part. So we've got 4 to 16, or 4 to 14. Yeah, you know what? We could probably leave it there. I mean, it just depends on what kind of data you're going to get with this. Obviously, this is not a very good correlation. But the next thing you need to do is draw a trend line. So come over here to your plus, or depending on what you're using, and you're going to go ahead and draw a trend line. And sometimes if you click right in there, it'll put one in, or you can go over here to create a custom for which type of trend line you would potentially get. In this case of our data, it is linear, so I'm just going to leave it there like that. Okay? And there you go. That is your graph that is made. You would want to click here to add some titles by clicking here for your axis titles, like that. And obviously you'd want to write your titles and everything. Make sure when you write your title, such as trunk circumference, make sure you always put a unit after in parentheses, centimeters, okay? And with that said, you will need to copy this and paste it into a file. If you want to use this in a Google Sheet file or something, you will need to probably use this handy snipping tool or something. For some reason, Excel does not paste pictures very well, so I get this little snipping tool. It's on Microsoft Windows, and you then just click here, and you can copy pretty much any picture you want to like that. I find it handy all the time when I'm making PowerPoints and I go online. But you can copy your picture that way, and now just paste it in pretty much any video or I'm sorry, Word file or anything you want to do when you turn in your assignment. Okay? So there you go. I just did one whole tree, and you don't have to freak out and say, oh, I have to do that all again. Actually, no, just copy this table and your graph as it is, and don't do anything else. Don't clear it. Leave it as is. Now go get your numbers for your other tree. I'll show you. I think I jammed my computer here. Whoops, no I didn't. And by the way, did you know on Windows you can click and drag a file like this to the side? So now I can see it two ways. But what I was going to show you is, let's just go ahead for the sake of argument and punch in our other data for the red maple. So I've already copied this. Let's say I've copied it and I pasted it in a lab report. I don't need this Excel file anymore. So now, without getting rid of anything else, just do this. We are going to change these two columns here, and I'm just going to get rid of them. It's going to mess up everything, including my graph. But just to show you how this works, watch this. Whoops, let's move this over here. So again, what I'm attempting to do is I'm going to copy my, I'm going to copy my red maple data into the table and watch Excel do everything exactly as we had it before. All I'm doing is changing these. It's already got everything else. You really only need to do it this one time. Let's go ahead and enter this in and just see what happens here. 30, 25, 39, 30, 67, 84, 24, 32, 27, 49. And then if we go all the way over here, we got 3.5, 3.1, 3.4, 4.2, 7.2, 9.3, 3.1, 4.1, 4.5, and the last is 6.3. Boom. Look at that. Excel calculated everything else because I already had the equations put in place in all of those cells. And it even calculated the R value for me, my correlation. Obviously, that is a very high correlation. So the only thing you really have to do at this point, you've already created your graph, and it already made a graph. The only thing at this point you have to do is you have to go back and rescale it, because obviously the trunk circumference is much smaller on the red maple from what we were using with the other trees. So in this case, you know, you can double click on it, or you can click and right click over it to format axis. But let's go back here to 0 and see if we can find out where is a good scale. So, all right, in this case, probably around, I see something at 24, so maybe we want to do 20 to, say, oh boy, what's the highest here? 8. Let's do 20 to, what if we do 20 to 100? We want it to be relatively nicely spaced out. 20 to 100. There. That spaced it out a lot nicer. And then Down here, we could leave it, we don't really need to get rid of 0 to 2. It's probably spaced out well as it is. And there we go. So our correlation is 0.95, which is much more precise. And again, you can copy this just like I told you. The only thing you have to do at this point is your chi-square problem. And then when you're all done with that, you write up your lab report. Make sure you read the rubric and everything on there on how to do that. Okay? So this is Mr. McGee, and if you need any help with this, please do not wait till the last minute, but please go back and watch this video thoroughly so you can see what is necessary and how you can succeed with this. Just remember, where there is a will, there is a way. Bye-bye.